Hello? Alors, est-ce que vous m'entendez? J'espère que oui, j'espère que tout va bien. Ah, je vais parler en anglais. So, hello everyone who is present, 0 viewers for the moment. This is a recording, so you will be able to see it on YouTube later. I'm a little bit sick today, so I'm sorry for my throat, but it's all right. So today we are talking about REST and Hypermedia. I prepared some slides, kind of. I will share my screen. So it's, as always, not very much prepared, but who cares? So I'm sharing my screen. Hope everyone can see it. I'm gonna share the link to people who want to join. Okay. So my slides are on slides.com. Somewhere. Who needs Flash anyway? So let me sign in. REST and Hypermedia. So it will be a bit more theoretical, more theory as live coding, but we will see what we can do, or maybe show examples of what we can do to make correct REST and Hypermedia using Symfony 2 ecosystem or tooling for Symfony 2. So what is REST and Hypermedia? So REST means representational state transfer. It's often said that REST is a stateless and should be stateless, but in the name there is state something, so it should mean something, right? And what does it mean is that the server itself should be stateless, which means that a response is given for a given request, not based on a previous request made before. So the context is not stored on the server, but it is stored on the client. So the state is here and the state is on the client. We will see later how HOS, which is another strange name, fits inside this logic. So representational, what does it mean? It's a representation of the data stored on the server, which is a resource. So the server stores resources. Those resources are the data of your application, for example. And what you send to the client are representations. Those representations could be represented by different ways, like a JSON content type, or XML, or whatever suits a need, or HTML. And each resource is by definition identifiable by its URL. And that's why you say URI versus URL. So URI is a more logic name. It's a unique identifier, but it doesn't mean that it's locatable on the internet. So URL is what is used when you want to locate a resource on the internet using HTTP, for example. But a URI is not mandatory working on the internet. For example, there are URIs in the real world that help you give a name to a book. For example, when you are in a library or something, there are URIs on the book, which is ESBN semicolon an ID. That, for example, is a URI. But on the real world, we use a URL, which is we can locate the resource at a given URL. Anyway, that's a detail. But that's what it is, a representation. So you can have many representation for the same resource based on the content type, and the client can decide which representation you would like to have using the accept header, request header. And the server, based on the request, he looks at the accepts header, sees that, oh, this client would like to have preferably applications at JSON format. I am able to give it, so I will send it. And if not, I will look at the next accepted content type. So the client could say, I prefer application JSON, but I accept also text HTML, for example. And the server, based on that, will say, OK, I can send you that, so I will do that. Otherwise, he will answer with an error code saying, I don't remember which error code, but it's all thought of. So that's the idea of a representation. The state, as I said, is not stored on the server, so it means that the client is responsible for storing the state of the current session, for example. So it's like it's more in memory, for example. So your browser, for example, has a current state, so the page you are currently on. So if you look at the browser, is at a given state, and you can decide to go in another state, so make a state transition using links, for example, or an operation. We will see later that HateOS and Hypermedia are exactly that, about like modifying the state from the client point of view. And transfer, so REST is not tied to HTTP by definition, or nor JSON or XML. So it's just that it's asynchronous by definition. So you give a representation of the resource at a given time from the server point of view, and you give it to the client. The time it arrives, it has been transferred. It was a state of the resource at a given time, but you're just transferring the bytes into the wire using HTTP, but you can totally do that using a binary protocol, using TCP or whatever you want. The transfer part is not a REST problem, for example. You could use HTTP, and there are REST implementations that are not using HTTP, for example. So you can totally do that. So the real thing with REST is really to just make representations of a resource and give it back to a client. And this resource, in order to be real, to be like really REST, should have links and should describe the possible next actions the client has. And we will see how Hypermedia helps us to do that. So I hope we will have time to show examples of real life things. And we will see how most REST, or what is being labeled as REST, is not mandatory REST. And we will see how we can do better, maybe. And I played a bit with REST and Hypermedia, and I discovered that it can potentially simplify a lot so the development of the client and everything. So we will see later. I hope I'm not talking in the void. Jeremy. Okay. So that's a part of about the transfer. So we talked about links, and let's see what. Okay, Alba can hear me. That's good. Let's see what a good example of a real correct implementation of REST and Hypermedia is HTML. So why does web works so well since 1990? It's because the format used on the web is a correct. It's a correct Hypermedia Format. So all I'm saying is based on the book of Matt Admundsen, which I totally recommend anyone who does web development to read. So it's a RESTful API or something like that. And his first chapter is to explain hypermedia and REST using HTML, because HTML is, to my mind, one of the best hypermedia formats outside. And that's maybe why the web still works after 25 years of HTML documents. And it's still not broken. So the browsers could still manage to navigate inside 10 years old documents and it still fucking works. So how is that possible? Well, the first thing is that we made a regression in the last years, for example, with the revolution of JSON APIs and everything. Everyone thinks that JSON is a new good thing to do to make a real web APIs. But in fact, it's kind of a regression if you don't follow the principle behind REST and hypermedia, because the resource, when you give back a resource to a client, you should, in the same time, provide a way to the client to know what to do next. And this possibility is this auto-discovery that allows the web to work after 25 years. So the fact that when the server gives back a resource, let's take the HTML example, it gives back you content. You wanted to see the content, but it also gives you a few metadata or something. It's called the href, so the links. But it also gives you forms, and these forms permits you to make an operation. For example, if it's a post request, you know that sending this post form will modify the state of the server if you post it. So that's the auto-discovery mechanism that browsers use to know what to do next. So he reads the response, displays the content, but also displays the links, and that's the agent. So in our case, the agent is a human, and he displays the link as a nice link you can click on, and goes to a next state and fetch a new resource, and this resource contains another set of links. This seems so basic, right? It seems like, Florian, you are teaching us how the basic of HTML works. But the thing is, we forgot to do that with the JSON APIs of nowadays. So if you look at most of the web APIs, and yes, GitHub API, for example, contains a few links, but that's all. If you look at all the formats which are hype nowadays, they forgot to handle operations. So the form, you see this good old form methodical post. This is a basic, right? It should be logical. You have that, but it's not there in the new hype JSON API format or HAL JSON. There is no such thing as a form. So there are extensions to the specification that allow you to add this metadata inside the HAL JSON response, but it's not really standard. So the only thing I know which really does handle operation, links, and also this search capabilities is JSONLD plus Hydra. So JSONLD is maybe complicated at the first glance, but it allows you to embed metadata on a response. So it's like if you wrap the content with some tags like href equals something. So instead of wrapping the content with some tags with JSONLD, you add a context object inside the JSON response. So that's how you handle the metadata of a response. And Hydra is using this context, this context thing to add the list of operations and links and all the things needed to make changing states inside the JSON. So if you do like basic JSON, just sending the data, you're doing it like it was before HTML, like it was before the web. And by definition, you won't be able to maintain a working application for 10 years or 25 years like it is for the web. And if you want to keep a working client and also manage to handle versioning, so you see the versioning thing, also again, a kind of a regression. Is the web versioned? Like, is the google.com from 1995 works on HTML v1.0? Or it's not maybe a good example because now it's HTML5. But there is no such version as Google v1, Google v2, Google v3 like we do with JSON APIs nowadays. So how does it work? That's because the client can auto-discover the next action. It's not hard-coded inside the client. So if every time Google changed his content or his way to display the link, or if Google adds a new link on his homepage, do you have to download a new client? No, you use the good same old browser like you do for 25 years. And how is that possible? It's because, again, auto-discovery. So I'm concentrating on this auto-discovery thing, but that's a very important part of the thing. And it leads to a lot of discoveries or understanding how to do good REST API nowadays. So I will see if there is no question or something. So I hope I'm not too boring. Again, I said it's very theoretical, but it's very important. So how to avoid this versioning? So nowadays you have this, a lot of best practices is to say that inside the content type, you had like JSON /VND plus V1 something, VND / V2, so that the client will say you which version it is capable of handling. But why should you do that? It's because the client knows too much about the possibilities the servers give you. And that's a problem. You should let the server tell you what are the next available possibilities, so this auto-discovery thing. And if you follow this principle, your client will be able to discover new possibilities, and you won't have to change the client source code to add a new link to this new action or something, or to this new page, because this new page link will be given by the server, which knows what possibilities are. So you gain a lot to provide this auto-discovery thing from the server. You avoid the client to hard code the things. And that's again a problem with many client-side ORMs, like Ember Data, for example, and which uses JSON API, and a lot of Angular libraries, which were on the Angular side. I take the example of a JSON client, of a JavaScript client like Angular or Ember. And a lot of tutorials start by hard coding the schema of the resources on the client. So you have this angular.model, and you say that the model has a title, has a thing, and you use that to create a form, and you use that to send the data to the server. But it would be so much better if the server said you, if you want to post a new resource, here is a URL, and here are the fields you are capable of sending. And if you do that, you make the client a little bit dumber, like he knows less about the structure of your schema, of your data, or what data you should send. But in the same time, you make it smarter because it will be able, the agent, so be it a browser or be it your Angular application, it's the same, it's an agent, it's a client. So it will be smarter because it will be able to handle so much more new things. So you make it more intelligent by making it more dumb. So less is more. I wrote it something, yeah, less is more with smarter client. And you do that using links, forms. So form equal post means a new an operation. Form method equal get means searching something. That's for HTML. But for JSON APIs, well, JSON doesn't have any way to say this is a link, this is a form, this is something. That's why JSON by definition it's totally not a replacement for HTML or for hypermedia format. JSON is not an hypermedia format. JSON is a data format or something. I don't even know how to name that, but JSON is just here to specify a graph of data, right? You have a scalar, you have an integer, you have a string, and you have arrays of string or array of objects, which are itself objects or strings. That's all you can do with JSON. In no way you could say, using just JSON to say that, okay, this property of this object will be a link. Maybe your client is smart enough to look at the content of the string and say, oh, but there is a slash at the beginning, or there is HTTP semicolon something, so it's a link, so I can display it. But it's very hazardous, right? In the same way, how do you describe in JSON if a string is an email, or is it a phone number or something? You can't. You have to add metadata. HTML did that pretty well with everything which is links, forms, and that's all finally. And with microdata or something, yeah, microdata, you can specify using classes or namespace tags in HTML or XML. You can specify this string here is a telephone, or this string here is an email, and your client will be automatically able to put this email as a link with a mail to semicolon something. You don't have to hard code it, because the server sent a representation which says this string is an email. He will be able to put it, and he will be able to if you want to add a new resource, to create a form out of it and say, okay, because it's an email, I will put it as an input type equal email or something like that. And you will have validation, client-side validation for free, for example. Don't have to hard code it in your Angular application anymore. So all this metadata is very important. And JSON doesn't do that at all. Neither XML do, right? JSON and XML, okay, JSON is a fat-free XML, but that's all. It's not better by definition, except if you count for the size, and size doesn't matter, right? So yeah, XML allows you to store a graph of data. JSON allows you to store a graph of data, but in no way it allows you to describe metadata. For that, you need a hypermedia format. HTML is better than XML or JSON for that. So that's why I say HTML is the best hypermedia out there. But nowadays there are a lot of different hypermedia specifications. So there is collection plus JSON, there is HAL JSON, there is JSONLD, there is a lot more that I forgot. There is Uber plus JSON, and all of them kind of allows you to put metadata, but not that much. Like I said, HAL JSON is very well known. It's used by Amazon and everything. So it has a huge, it's like battle tested. But again, it doesn't say if you are allowed to post a new resource on this URL. So what is said in the specification, for example, of JSON API, it says any URL you see. So if you got a URL, you can try to post something to it, but you don't know what. You don't know if it works. So maybe you get a 500, maybe you get a 400, maybe you get nothing, you get a 404, or you don't know before. So the client will maybe, if he's smart enough, you say, oh, it's JSON API format. I know that if I post something on this URL, it might be possible that it creates a resource. Let's try out. So you fill out a field, you fill in your form, sorry, with a lot of information, and you click the submit thing. The client makes this request, and it gets you a 404. And yeah, the format is not smart enough to say no, you couldn't do that. You should have. You can try, but yeah, that's a bit sad, right? And it makes the client angry because he fills this form for 20 minutes and he sends it, but the server refuses or ignores the request. So that's why you need a hypermedia format that gives you the list of operation to do, like delete, update, create, and how to create, how to update, how to delete. And JSONLD is a pretty good format for that. In fact, it's one of the first format I know, except HTML, that does that embeds the list of operations inside the request. So JSONLD, there is a lot of cool example on JSONLD. It might be complicated. You see a lot of error base. There is like compact versions. There is like a lot of vocabulary to understand. But there is a nice tooling around it. And there is Symfony, bundles, components, and everything for that. Unfortunately, I don't like the implementation of that, but it's not bad. How is it named again? If Jeremy maybe hears me, he may be able to say me the name of this library which handles JSONLD. Anyway, JSONLD, I will type it, Symfony. So I won't do live coding for that because I never tested it, by the way. So I don't exactly remember. So that's Dunglass is a user who does that. It's deprecated. Yeah, API platform. That's the thing I was searching. So this library allows you to use JSONLD inside Symfony and auto-generating a lot of things. You just use annotations to say this entity, for example, is displayable. Yes, it is. So this entity, you annotate it with being a resource. You give the list of operations available on it, and map it to a root or something, and it will automatically generate the things. So it means that if you configure your server correctly, it will generate representations that a smart client will be able to understand, and you will create the client part for you. Like you configure your entities and the list of operation, and I think there is a client that automatically generates the things. So this JSONLD playground, there is a client-side part. It's like a browser. And there is also this thing for the HAL browser. And you can see the power of HAL browser. I don't know which one. So it's like a browser inside the browser. So your browser uses a HAL agent to render the HTML. Maybe in 10 years we will have like Mozilla Firefox will be able to understand JSONLD like he is nowadays able to understand HTML, and it will automatically render a nice UI like it does with HTML. There is no much fundamental difference between HTML and JSONLD, by the way. So why not? But currently you have to use a JavaScript client to render a single page application inside your browser, to make a browser. in a browser. That's funny. But this JSONLD example uses only the metadata sent by the server to render all this page. So there is no hard-coded thing on the client. All these links are auto-discovered. All the operations which are possible. Again, that's a list of potentially working methods, but you don't know with JSON, versus in JSONLD, where I don't know where I think I can try to show you how it could work, but I don't remember exactly. Anyway, so the JSONLD thing is that it will tell you what are the operations. So if you can't add a new resource, it will not list the post method as a potential operation of this resource, which is cool. So that's JSONLD. And to be a little bit more concrete, this API platform here allows you to very fastly make a JSONLD implementation, which is great. Internally, I think he uses not the JMS serializer, but he uses a Symfony serializer component. And I think this Douglas guy improved a lot the serializer. And I think it's partly because he wanted to handle JSONLD correctly. So he contributed to Symfony a lot thanks to using this, by building this API platform, I think. Other than that, there is another nice tool for Symfony, which is a real Durand 8OS. And this one uses GMS serializer under the hood, and there is a bundle for that, of course. And but this one is only working with JSONLD for the moment, even though you can totally add your own. So there is where is it? Yeah, there is this XML-HAL or JSON-HAL. There are some pull requests talking about yeah, there is a JSON API serializer. There was at the time a JSONLD pull request, I think, somewhere. So it would be great if 8OS would be able to handle other formats that JSON-HAL. But the problem is, well, it's a limitation, but it's not a problem. JSON-HAL only allows you, and 8OS only allows you to specify links, which is great already because it allows you to make a real 8OS. By the way, I forgot to talk about 8OS. So Hypermedia, so we talk about that, as the engine of application state. So what does it mean? So we saw again what Hypermedia is. It's links, a list of operations, list of state transition, and all. And an engine, what is an engine? It's a thing that lets you move, right? So the links and the list of operation allows you to move. So it's really the thing that gives power and lets you move inside your application state. So if you follow a link, you put gas and the engine will move you to the new state of your application. So the application is a client state finally. So you have this application. It's a home page, for example, and you go to a new state of your application by following the link inside the home page, going you to like a form or something, and that's 8OS. That's exactly 8OS. So it's very basic again, but a lot of people say, what is 8OS? But in fact, it's just basic things you do with HTML, but you don't think of it a lot. And it's funny, like, in my head, at least personally, and I would love to hear about you guys, if you also think not the same between JSON API and HTML API, or like good old HTML website. but it's the same at the end. And it took me years to understand that JSON API are actually a regression compared to HTML or the way it works. And I really would love to hear you, like maybe on the event page. If there is a comment box here, or maybe on Twitter or wherever you want. Really, I don't care. Do you think that HTML is so different than a JSON API? And I don't remember exactly. Oh, yeah. And when you think of H2S, did you ever think of HTML? Because finally, HTML is the best H2S thing you used for 10 years or more. So anyway, when I started thinking about REST and Hypermedia and everything, I was not thinking of HTML at all. I was in the JSON hype and looking at the Twitter JSON API and at the GitHub JSON API. But those are very bad examples of a hypermedia-driven API. Very bad. So GitHub has a few links, like inside the JSON response. You have a few links to give you like where to find the issues, where to download the zipball, where to get the issues. I already say that, sorry. So there is a few links, but if you want the client to understand it, you have to go on the documentation page. So there is this docs.api.github.com or something, and you have to read it, and you have to hard code this information in your client. So you, as a developer, read the docs and are hard coding what links there is in the JSON response when you read this doc. But if GitHub adds a new one, you have to update your client again. And there is no Autodiscover thing yet. They are making improvements, but the GitHub API, even though it's a great API, I'm not saying it's bad. I personally don't think I could do half of what GitHub API does or something. So I'm not criticizing anything, but it's a fact that it doesn't allow auto-discovery very well. You have to, as a developer, read the docs and hard code your knowledge inside the code of the client, and that by definition is bad. So yeah. Anyway, this H2S thing is yeah, the engine really is the auto-discovery thing, and the fact by following links and knowing that there is an operation to do here, like posting a new resource or put or patch. So that allows you to move inside your application state, and that's a good thing. So this H2S thing, it allows you, again, with annotations or YAML or XML to describe on a resource, so something which is serializable by JMS. It allows you to add a link, and it's very well made. If you look at it, you can say that you have a user, for example. You can say, okay, this user has a link. So when I serialize this user, he will be represented alongside Hello? I'm sorry, I have been disconnected. I don't know why. Anyway, I hope you're seeing me again. I will ask. Google disconnected me. So I was saying, and I hope it's okay. Cool. Okay, thanks. So I was saying, yes, as 8OS doesn't allow anything else that links via this relational notation or YAML definition. It would be great to have an annotation to explain the possible operations. You could have operation 1, operation 2, like edit, delete, classical, but also you could have more task-based operations, like not just CRUD operations, but you can totally make new operations out of it. And so you can really have task-based application using hypermedia operations. So what I mean by task-based, it is not just CRUD operations, but some more complicated things like validate something or complex operations. So of course, but this is more another topic. But yeah, a lot of people say REST only apply to CRUD because the HTTP verbs only allows you to make post, put, delete. So which means you can only create, retrieve, get, and update, which is kind of wrong because you can totally say the list of operations to do, and you can describe how to send a post request to this resource, and this resource could totally be a task for the application. So it bores me a lot when people say that REST does not fit the DDD, for example, because DDD is being more than CRUD, but REST also is more than CRUD. It's not because there is only 4 verbs, HTTP verbs, that you cannot describe more of it using metadata and everything. So again, HTML, okay, it's a standard. A lot of clients understand it, and indeed, you have to create a standard that allows you to make the client understand that you have more operation than just CRUD. And it's totally doable, and JSONLD is a good standard for that. So I'm thinking about JSONLD, even though I don't have a lot of experience. I had a few experience with JSONHAL, which works quite okay. I was able to create like a smart client using JSONHAL that generates automatically a UI based on the JSONHAL API response. So a bit like the JSONHAL browser I showed you before, but a little bit nicer. And it worked quite well. And the result of my work is in Hypermedia. I know I make dad jokes. So Hypermedia, oops, it's like Hypermedia. Got it? And there is 2 libraries. So there is this agent, so the one which is responsible to create the UI, so the HTML UI. So it's in fact it's a single page application written in Aurelia.io. So it's quite standard. Oh, that's the agent, sorry. And the agent is a headless library which understands a lot of different formats: connection to JSON, HALPS, HAL-JSON, and HTML. So you can talk to a server with get your HTML, and he will extract all the links, all the search, all the operations you can do, and all the searches you can do. And using this HTML resource, he will create a HTML UI. So that's funny. Like using HTML as a hypermedia format, but not using it as a display format. So that's a little bit crazy, but it works. That's the worst part. And HTML actually has more operations than HAL. For example, if you look at HAL JSON, you can't describe the operations. You can only describe the search you can do, and the links you have, but you can't describe operations. So actually, as I said, again, HTML is better than HAL. So there is this collection JSON, again, doesn't have any operation support, only post or put, but you're not sure that the server accepts it. You have Uber JSON, which also is quite, so it's very basic. I don't have a lot of support for all the formats. It's just a work in progress or a proof of concept. But there is a few formats you can use, and using the same agent, you can build a standard client. And aside of this agent, as I said, there is a browser which is using the agent library to create a UI out of it. And it's a Aurelia.io single page application. And it's also quite dumb. If you look at what it does, it asks the agent to give me all the resource, and out of it, it will create a HTML view. So if you go on the node HTML, you see, I get a resource, give me all the links out of it, and display it as a href. Give me all the queries, and display it as a form methodical get, and query it with a queue for something. And same for so that's the data of your response, the items, and the operations are the list of potential things, so update, delete stuff. And automatically it will generate a pretty basic UI out of it, but you can use it to make it better. So that's quite simple, but it works. So that is what is actually Hypermedia, REST, and well, I only scratch the surface of it. But what you should remember of this monologue again is that it's very important to describe or to let the client discover the thing. You will gain a lot of time by letting the client build the UI by himself, or at least knowing what are the possible actions and everything. And again, I would love to hear you about your thinking or your thoughts about HTML being a correct hypermedia format or not. Now I told you that. I'm curious because I was so ignorant for so many years. So I'm doing web development for like 10 years and using HTML for same. But I never thought of HTML as yet another hypermedia format. For me, it was more, okay, that's all the stuff you have to do to make the browser understand. And when JSON APIs came hype, I was like, oh, that's a new thing. That's better than doing HTML, good old HTML applications. But it actually isn't, because HTML is better. So unless you do real correct JSON APIs using JSONLD or whatever formats that allows Autodiscovery, unless you do that, you're doing worse than HTML applications. That's my point of view, of course. And again, I'm not saying it's because I'm doing the same things. I still do bad JSON APIs because most of the time you maybe don't need Autodiscovery or stuff. If it's a private API, it's maybe okay to not make hypermedia. But if it's a public one, like GitHub or Twitter, I think you should. So if you are developing like public APIs, it's very important. Or if you have more than one client, because that's worse, and it's an economical responsibility, because if you are making a public API, it means that there will be a lot of clients. Think of the Twitter API or Flickr API. Imagine the number of clients, like hundreds of clients written in different languages, that Flickr has to think of in terms of BC breaks and everything. Imagine the cost of modifying the source code of so much application, so much clients, because the guys added a new link or added a new feature, and the client doesn't know it, so you have to modify it to add the link to this new feature. Imagine if it was auto-discovered. That would be a huge win. So you can't automate all the things, but you can help a lot with this kind of approach. So I let you think out of all of that, and I'd love to have your comments. So I think I explained everything I wanted. I had only like 10 slides. And my whole point was about, yeah, smarter clients. Smarter clients means more money. Think of that. If your boss asks you why are you losing so much time making a hypermedia API, tell him like we are economizing money. So that's it. And to come back to what I say, Matt Admundsen, RESTful API. He even has code. So there is a GitHub. Yeah, there is a code on GitHub or something. So imagine there is a book with a GitHub project aside. So that's nice. So he uses Node.js to make some example of how to make this auto-discovery thing, explain hypermedia. And this book is, I can only recommend to watch this book. So just read this book. He will explain what I try to explain badly, because I'm very bad at explaining maybe some things. So yeah, this book is full of great things, and he explains very well all the stuff I explained about state transition, links, all the formats. He make a huge, very detailed description of all the formats, why they are good, why they are bad, and yeah, explain even more with the semantic challenge. So how to make the client understand what the data means, again with microdata, you know, knowing that this field is an email and knowing that this is a telephone number, and how to make the client understand. So again, JSONLD helps a lot to do that. So you can contextualize the data and associate a field with its metadata. And a client, he can, if he knows what an email is, he knows what an email is for like every application, right? Because if you look at the Twitter API or the Flickr API, an email is an email. So if the client knows how to handle data which is associated to email, he will be able to do it everywhere. So again, smarter clients means huge win, and you can make generic clients like HTML browsers are nowadays. So that's it, guys. An hour passed. My monologue is over. I hope you enjoyed. So yeah, that's it. Oh shit, I didn't share my screen for so much. Anyway. So please tell me in the comments. Really, I'm very curious to hear about what you think about those HTML format, about HTML, because I love to talk about the fact being HTML a better format than the other. And have a good weekend, and bye.